Hello everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to our Institution of Global Professional Free Webinar. Thank you all for joining us in this wonderful afternoon. My lovely audience, today I am your host for the afternoon. My name is Yarni Akhtar, I am from Bangladesh. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to be associated with IGP as a global member. I feel honored and privileged to host this webinar. It's my delight to welcome you all to our Institution of Global Professional Free webinar. Thank you all for joining with us in this marvelous afternoon. And it's my humble request to all of you stay with us till the end. And don't forget to take, share, and mention your friend. So let's together and learn together. Today, our webinar topic is trends and issue in language assessments, and our speaker name is Kevin Jack Morales. He is from Philippines. He is an international speaker and moderator reception of international gold medals in research and education. He is also English teacher, English club advisor, post English radio and television broadcasting research advisor. So let's invite our speaker. Hello, sir.
Hi, good morning, ma'am. Thank you very much for that kind introduction.
Okay, okay, sir. Sir, you can share your presentation.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. I'll be pleasing on to our dear participants on our virtual room. I'll be sharing to you my PowerPoint presentation for this afternoon's lecture.
Okay, sir.
Okay, madam, may I please verify if my screen is already, if my PowerPoint presentation is already on my screen?
What, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, is it visible? Visible. You can present a presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. To all our participants in the virtual room. Thank you very much, my dear colleagues. I will call you colleagues because I don't want to treat my lecture actually to be very monopolizing. Much more that I was oriented that most of my participants in the room are actually coming from the academic sector. So I'm very privileged and honored to have been taught and have been given this genuine opportunity of the Institute for Global Professionals to actually lecture on the issues and trends in language assessments. And with that being said, my dear colleagues, I would also would want to elicit your responses on our comment boxes to show our active interaction. At the same time, to also make this table of discourse very fruitious and rich this afternoon. So I believe that because we are already experienced educators, maybe the others are aspiring and budding educators also. There are knowledge or pieces of knowledge that we have garnered along the way in the educational journey, which we think could actually be very contributory and very rich, a rich addition to our discourse this afternoon. So before I start, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to please think of any word that you think are associated to the word language assessment. Okay, now may I please repeat my question? Please maximize our comment box or chat box to key in any word or any phrase or any clause that you think are actually very connected, related, or associated to the word or to the phrase language assessment. Okay, please do that in 15 seconds. I'm very curious and intrigued as to how my educators look at language assessments at this point of time. Ayan. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm still waiting for some responses in our room. Okay, there you have it. Madam, I think we can also read aloud some of the words on our chat box if there are already answers provided by our participants. Okay, dear colleagues, I will repeat the question for the sake of the others who just got in to our comment box. I mean, to our virtual room. May you please provide me certain words or phrases that you think are directly connected to our topic, which is on language assessment. So, how thus, a certain teacher or specifically a language teacher looks at or perceives a certain language test or a certain language assessment. Okay, and I would appreciate you sharing your feedbacks on our comment box. Thank you very much for those responses. Okay. Okay. Now, we may have came across different definitions or perceptions of as to what language assessments are, and we have been doing this all since time immemorial. All language teachers or language educators can definitely relate to what I'm speaking about here about language assessment. So it's actually a matter of understanding that when you say it's assessment, it's trying to come up with an academic purpose of giving a certain activity, giving a certain task, or giving a certain performance, or probably an academic procedure to our learners that they will get the concept of our learning at a certain point or even to to a wider point of time. Okay, now thank you very much for the responses that I've received from our participants, from Sir Isaiah or Madam Isaiah. uh, he or she said about receptive and productive language skills. We also have Mom Justin, which she thinks that she thinks that language assessments are connected to words like language proficiency test and vocabulary and speaking skills. And here comes Mom Jemima, who said that language assessments measure one's language proficiency. Now, I think that the very common that all of these responses point out is the fact that we talk about language, we talk about proficiency, we talk about fluency, we talk about language use. And we will, in this particular lecture, and I just went ahead of myself because we will try to target three important or primordial aims or objectives of our lecture this afternoon. I was just given an hour to finish the lecture, and I hope I could really enlighten you about a very vast discussion for language assessments. So, the first one in this lecture, my dear colleagues, from wherever you are in the entire world, the first one is the lecture will revolve on the discussion of essential knowledge and language assessments. Okay. Second, our lecture will also dwell on the issues in language assessment. So when you talk about issues, we talk about problems, challenges, or shortcomings of a language educator or the educational system as a whole for developing and administering language assessments. Okay. And the third one is we aim as language educators in this lecture to be enlightened about the trends or the fab or the fads in language assessment. So what are the changes that we are already embracing at this point in time, because language assessment had evolved dramatically. Okay, language assessment had changed over time. So if you remember, we started with a paper pencil test, right? And all of the items that we give our students are actually multiple choice bound. That means to say that our students are just limited on the options that we give per item. Okay, so here is a printed paper. The questions are sequenced on a printed sheet of paper, and then each question has options A, B, C, or onwards, and then the students are just isolated with those options, meaning to say there's only one definite correct answer among the multiple options we provided per statement. That is in the context of what transpired before, because our earlier orientation or our earlier practice about language assessment is to come up with objective tests. So that is covered by paper and pen test, or in some references they call it actually as the traditional or the conventional assessment. Okay, now let's start with my dear colleagues, to our teachers and to our participants in the room. Let's start with try to generalize our essential knowledge on language assessments. And there are people who actually recited on our comment box. I appreciate our responses, and I think that you are so moved and driven by this topic. So let's talk about the types of assessments. Now we were saying that assessment is an educational, academic, not a requirement basically, but an academic or an educational practice where we give an assessment, meaning to say we try to measure what our students already know, what they have known about our lesson and activities, and how prepared they are to even learn the more complicated body of knowledge. Okay, so in the context of the English classroom, we share similarities with the different subjects in terms of what kinds of assessments do we give. And primarily an English teacher would actually give a diagnostic assessment. Now, for diagnostic assessment, we try to give this kind of assessment because we wanted to know what are the things that the students already know. So we're trying to diagnose it, as it's as if that we are doctors or physicians, that when there's a patient in the hospital, we try to still do a diagnosis, which means to say we undergo the patients to different medical procedures or medical operations, so that we would know what is this patient feeling, physically feeling about. In the classroom, if that's the analogy, in the classroom, then we believe that the teacher or the language teacher should also construct a diagnostic test so that we can determine what skills, what knowledge are our students already possessing so that we can start from there. In cases that our students are really not familiar about the course or about the subject, then the diagnostic assessment would also be helpful because we will know how to arrange and sequence our lessons and activities. Okay, so that is diagnostic assessment. And then, second one, we have the formative. Normally, in our schools now, when you say it's formative, it's more of assessment for learning. So we mean that the formative assessment would be an in-process assessment. So, for example, one time I'm discussing about parts of speech. For example, that is my lesson for grade 7 students. I will actually give them a formative assessment like tasks to not only to warm them up but to actually test and gauge how far did they learn that lesson in that point of time. So it also will serve as their practice and at the same time an opportunity for me as the teacher to give feedback as to how they've performed in the formative assessment. And we understand formative assessments as non-graded tasks. These are not part of their academic grades, but this will be part of their academic life because we're trying to prepare them for the graded tasks. So we use formative assessments to do that. Now we also have summative assessments. For the summative assessments, we mean that these are already the graded tasks. So the logic is the language teacher will give first the formative assessment after the lesson or within the lesson so that we can prepare the students for the summative assessment. In that way, if we made it very perfect to administer the formative assessment, then we can assure that the students will be conscious and aware of how did they perform on these non-graded tasks so that they can perform even better for the summative assessments, which are part already of their academic grade. So normally for formative assessments which are non-graded, we place them after one lesson or within one lesson. But for the summative assessment, it will actually be the summary of all multiple lessons. Okay, so we administer summative assessments as graded assessments at the end of an instructional period. So probably the teacher can decide to have it weekly or whatever mode that will be. We also have what we call confirmative assessment. We also have non-reference or sorry, that's norm referenced assessment. So when we already have the result, like the numerical results of our assessments to our students in the classroom, if it's a norm reference assessment, we're trying to compare the students against the performance of the other students in the same classroom. Okay, so what happens is student A, if student A performed poor on a test, we mean to say that as teachers, if it's a norm reference assessment, we'll try to compare the score of student A to the score of the other students in the same test in the same classroom. In that way, we already know what's the trend or the pattern. Like, why did this number of students failed in this item? What is there in the items to improve so that they can get it? Or it will tell you that which items should you rediscuss, okay, or reinforce further for the students so that they can get it next time. And we also have criterion reference just to differentiate that to the norm reference. We mean that the criterion reference would be not already against or not already comparing the students' performance to each other, but we're trying to compare the students against a set of criteria. So when we give our assessment in a criterion reference type, we mean that we give rubrics. We give whether that be analytic or holistic, and we give criteria as success indicators. Okay, so these rubric or checklist that we give when we give our assessment to the students will actually be serving as the guide for our students to know which points of the rubric should they focus on, and also as a guide to the language teachers to know which points of the output or performance of the students would be rate based on the rubric. So the rubric would already give you the descriptions if the student was able to achieve this pointer or not, what went wrong, all these things will be detailed by a rubric or a checklist, and that's what we use for criteria. So again, a norm reference is the student's performance on an assessment is compared to the performance of the other students in the same assessment in the same classroom. And then the criterion reference assessment, or any kind of assessment which the performance of the student or the score of the student in the assessment is compared to a certain set of criteria or a certain set of a rubric. Okay, now we go we also have what we call ipsative assessment. When you talk about ipsative assessment, it will also project how far did our students grow in learning. Like, what's their growth? Previously, I've given a test and their score is quite low. Now, I gave another test which is also related to the previous test, and then I see that there was a significant improvement on their scores, which means to say that there is progression of their learning, and that is what we wanted to achieve as language educators. We want them to progress in their learning, to keep improving, to keep being more knowledgeable and more skilled in our classroom. Now, with that in mind, my dear colleagues, we're trying to revisit again our understanding as to what assessment of learning is and assessment for learning. So again, for the summative assessment, it's assessment for learning. These are non-graded tasks. We prepare them with practice before they finally take the summative assessment, which is the assessment of learning, which are already graded in our classroom. Now, normally all teachers would definitely know this, but I want to copy and to reiterate the this wise definition provided by Terry Hake. He said that the difference between assessment of learning, that is formative assessment, and assessment for learning, which is the summative, I mean, assessment of learning is the summative, and then assessment for learning is the formative. It's a matter of function and purpose, and a matter of who. So he said that formative assessments, or summative assessments or assessment of learning, is a way to see what students can do. Okay, so how did they perform with the task given all the knowledge that they got from you during the discussion, or all the knowledge that they got from the activities that you have administered as a teacher. But assessment for learning, which is the formative assessment, is a way to see what the teacher should do in response. So if you think that this is the score of the students already on the task or on the activity, what can we do? Which items did they fail most of the time? Okay, so we can go back to that and reinforce that concept. Or which of the items in the assessment are already very easy to our students. So further, we can upgrade the level of difficulty if that's necessary. So that is the difference of that. Now, as I was saying a while back, we transitioned, we dramatically evolved from our orientations of assessments over time, because we started with having traditional assessment, which is actually the paper and pen test or the objective tests. And we now usher to the world of giving alternative assessments instead. So let's just try to revisit the concept. When you know it's a traditional assessment, um, it's already making sure that the curriculum directs, okay, or the curriculum directs the assessment, and there is an emphasis on developing body of knowledge. And then we promote in the traditional assessment, we promote the what knowledge, meaning to say we're just bound into the cognitive aspect of learning. So it's more on memorization. Probably it's memorization and rote learning. So the students need to really memorize word by word so that they can answer our objective questions. That is the focus of conventional or traditional assessment before. Or the traditional assessment will also provide a one time snapshot of student understanding. But for alternative assessment, there were changes, okay? Because alternative assessment would direct the curriculum already. So this is how the student performed on my assessment. So I have to check on the curriculum which ones could we still improve in the curriculum based on the results of the student's scores or students' performances on my given assessment. Okay, so you see, we're trying to draw relationship between our curriculum and our assessments. Okay, they have to be married, which means to say they have to be interlinked. What's presented on the curriculum should be supported by assessment, and the result of the assessment should be addressed by the curriculum. Okay, so that's what we aim as educators, so that we keep our learning, our students learning more organized, more progressive, and more properly paced and sequenced. Okay, now the alternative assessment also emphasizes on ensuring proficiency at a real world task, which I think is not much dominant in traditional assessments, because right now in our current educational era, we wanted our students to come into boxes, that they are not just taking with what they're learning inside the classroom, and the memorization should go beyond. Okay, why? Because they need to discharge, or they need to use the knowledge that they got from us in our discussions and activities and apply it to real world tasks. That is the goal of an alternative assessment. Okay, we want the students to apply what they learned in our um, in our in our classroom. Okay, so it's already beyond memorization, it's already beyond route learning. They have to apply the knowledge. And we also have, that's why it's a how knowledge, because if you said it's a noun, how could I encounter that in the market? If I go to the market and then I hear somebody speaking about a noun, how should I understand that? Okay, that's actually a very practical example, or provides an examination of learning over time. That's also the reason why in alternative assessments, we are progressive and spiral. Okay, we start with giving assessments that are easy or manageable to our students, and then we try to progress the level of difficulty to something intermediately difficult, and then until the most difficult items, so that we can test them. But again, the very heart of alternative assessment is that we are after the how. So, how are you going to use this knowledge, which is a cognitive aspect, into a psychomotor application? So, how will you apply this when you go out of the classroom? Okay, so that is the heart of alternative assessments. Now, um, I want you to please go back to the characteristics or features of an alternative assessment. Now, back in 1991, although it's an old reference, this is still something that speaks of reality when we perceive alternative assessments. So, Ashbacker in 1991 said that one of the characteristics of an alternative assessment is problem solving, higher level thinking, tasks that are worthwhile, and all of these things. Now, I want you, my dear colleagues, to please observe these characteristics, because we'll try to combine these different perceived characteristics of different authors and test experts in the field, so that we can come up with a more holistic view of what alternative assessments are and its relevance now. Okay, so from 1991, on the idea of Ashbacker about what alternative assessments are, it was supplemented further by himself with another author, and that is Winters back in 1992. So there were like changes on how they perceived or how they characterized alternative assessments. And it was also further expounded by Huerta Machas back in 1995. And with that, my dear colleagues, we're coming with a combined understanding. So take the ideas of Ashbacker, take the ideas of Winter, take the ideas of Huerta Marcia, and combine it all, look at that they're similar with some of the points. And this is exactly what you see on the slide now. So generally, if we go to alternative assessment, which means that our students will execute different tasks or practical or real life tasks to demonstrate or to showcase their knowledge or their learning in the classroom, then our alternative assessments should support these characteristics. So, what are those? We have to make sure, my dear English teachers, and our even to the rest of the disciplines, as test givers, and we want to compose an alternative assessment for our students, we need to have alternative assessments that require students to perform, create, produce, or do something. But we don't just give them out of nowhere. We give them a work or an activity that is with substance. And basically, it should be an application of what they learned in the classroom. It should be something that they have been eligible because of the discussions that we do, and it's now their time to apply that learning. So that is the heart of alternative assessment. And next one, we don't give our students out of the world tasks. We give them real world tasks. Okay. So, for example, when I'm discussing oral communication and I'm telling them about proper choice of words or diction, okay, it matters for these students to become good communicators. And so, my lesson would say I have to orient my students which words should be properly used in context. Now, I will already create a certain simulative or real world task where they can apply that learning. So maybe I can have them communicate with vendors in the market. That's more authentic. That's an alternative assessment. Or I would ask them to actually listen to a video of a public speaker and then have them identify which words could they think would still be more proper than what was used by the speaker in the video or in the audio. Or I would also want them to deliver a certain speech that they have written, that they have to demonstrate their learning on how to properly choose the words in their speeches. So that's actually more real world. Okay, so we're trying to connect their learning in the classroom to what exists in their direct environment. We're trying to connect their classroom knowledge to what happens in the real world beyond the classroom. Okay, so that's the heart of alternative assessments, and it was corroborated by three or more different theorists and experts in test administrations and test creations. Okay, now we also want our alternative assessments to be non-intrusive, which means to say that my dear colleagues, that we want to consider the point that our students are diverse, and we need to respect that in the way that we construct our items. Make sure that we don't have linguistic, cultural, or social political biases. When we construct a certain item, it has to be directly connected to their context or to their situation. Like, for example, in the Philippines, since we are majority invested to American English, we understand taxi more than understanding the word cab. But we know that in talks of variety of the English language, when we use the word taxi in an English classroom for Filipino students, they are more familiar with taxi because that is what they're very familiar at, especially when you go to highways, they normally call that taxi. And then here comes you introducing the word cab. They're not more familiar on that because this is a British variety. But what I'm saying here is we try to choose the words also. For example, you want to construct an examination that includes the word taxi and cob. Probably the better word that you have to use in that item is the word taxi because this is connected to their context. This is what they are familiar about. So we want it to be non-intrusive, something that is connected to their context and has no bias. Okay, we also don't construct items that are attacking them or harassing them and their social political beliefs. This should not be something that's presented or manifested on the questions of our assessment or on the activities that we give our students as alternative assessments. Okay, they should be non-intrusive or non-harassing for our students. And we allow them to use tasks that have meaningful instructional activities, something that really is connected to their lives. And we look at knowledge that we teach in the classroom to be applied for their real life endeavors. And we wanted to also focus on both the process and the product. So, and in the process, when we give a certain assessment to our students, like in a certain oral communication class or in a certain purposive communication class, I would want my students to actually compose their own speeches. So I have discussed already the types of speech. I told them how exactly should these speeches be written, and now it's their turn to do that. So I have to observe the process. How would my students apply what they've learned from my discussion in composing the speech that I've required of them? That is the process. And that becomes more real world, more practical, more hands on to our students. Okay. And the speech itself, while observing them on the process of doing the speech, they you will also observe them how they finalize the speech, and that becomes their product. The written speech is already their product. So you see, we are not only focused on one dimension. In alternative assessment, we focus on both process and products, and of course the performance. Okay. So another one is we try to elevate the level of the learning into a higher level, or we want them to be more analytical and more critical on judge in giving judgments, in giving answers, in analyzing situations before they provide answers. So we have to articulate that mindset to our students. Okay, gone are the days when we give them what is obvious in the objective tests. We need to provide situations where they can apply their learning, and they themselves would analyze how exactly this learning will be applied on that situation. We are teaching them the real world concepts. Or eight, we provide information about the strengths and weaknesses of our students. Okay, alternative assessments do that. And alternative assessments also consider the multilinguistic or multicultural identity of our classrooms. Okay, especially because we are in the age of globalization and internationalization. They have different cultures, they have different languages. So we have to be sensitive. When we give a task, it should not harass their cultural and linguistic identity. When we give a task, it has to be neutral and objective and fair to all our students, considering their diversities in culture and language. And our alternative assessment will also teach our students to have or should encourage open disclosure of standards and rating criteria. In giving alternative assessments, it's important, my dear colleagues, my dear teachers, to actually give them the criteria. So what will their basis be? Okay, if I perform this, or if I let my students perform such an activity or give a certain assessment, how will I be rated? What will be the pointers that I have to abide by? Okay, so importantly, we need to give them the rating criteria. It would also inform the students which ones should they focus on in doing the task or in giving the performance. And at the same time, the rubric will also be our point of judgment as educators. If our students were able to effectively apply what they've learned in the classrooms to the performances, outputs, or products that we have assigned them to do. Okay, and then another one is we call upon the teachers to perform new instructional and assessment roles. So if you think that based on the discussions and what transpired in the classroom, and based on the process and performance in doing the alternative task or alternative assessment, maybe we can already check if there are still something missing about our discussion that we need to reinforce to them, or this is also the point in time when we teachers will figure out if they really learned something from the discussions that transpired in the classroom, and that should be manifested on the quality and appropriateness and excellence of the students to come up with the products and performances using what they learned from our discussions. Okay, now let's try to hear Marsha or Huerta Marches, who also contributed some of the characteristics of alternative assessments. She's pointing out that our assessment should generally be trustworthy, which means to say it's credible and auditable. Now, when I say auditing or auditability in language test, my dear teachers, it is actually the process of creating and even administering the test. But it only doesn't stay there. It also means that we need to check the items that we give or instructions that we give for our students in alternative assessments. Okay, we need to check if they are too easy or too difficult tasks. We need to check if it's free from linguistic, cultural, and socio-political biases, or we need to check that there was a clear set criteria or rubric in rating their outputs or performances later on. We need to check all of these things because this matters for the students, and this matters because our heart is to give this assessment that the students could demonstrate what they've learned, and at the same time, we would be informed how far they have learned from our discussion. Okay. Now, in talks of alternative assessment, there is a word crafted by Brown, if I'm not mistaken, from that point, that is alternatives in assessment. So we're already stepping away from the ordinary traditional assessment we've been used to, which is the paper and pen. In fact, in the Philippines and even to the Asian countries, gone are the days when we already just give a printed examination or a printed quarterly test for our students, correct? Because we are already open to the idea that examination can be done through performances. Like, for example, in languages, if I'm talking about professional writing, I will ask the students to actually produce a written text instead than giving them a printed examination which has options A and B and multiple choices part, right? I would rather give them an essay task where they can write and I can authentically observe how far they've used the language, okay, or how far they've learned about the language in the classroom. And that's very important, okay? That is very important. Now, in the alternative assessments, there are different or general categories of alternative assessment. So the first one with their colleagues is what we call now, this comes from Brown and Hudson, has selected the response assessments. Okay, so according to these researchers, when you say it's selected response assessments, because my lecture, my dear colleagues, are actually a combination of different researches, okay, which I've synthesized and which I've collaborated together to come up with these lecture. Okay, so according to the researchers, there are assessments which we call our selected response assessments, which means to say that we give our students the language material. If that is the English class, if that is in the English classroom, we give our students the language material. Say, for example, a literary piece. If you are teaching a literature class, you give them the literary piece which they will read, and then normally for the literary piece, we have like objective tests that follow. So who are the characters? What is the climax of the story? What is the exposition of the story? What is the denouement or closing of the story? So we provide options for them after the reading. Okay, we provide questions that they will encounter in the reading of the literary piece. And that is actually what we call the selected response assessment. That's why the word selected there would stand for options that we provide as key answers, or options they could choose from to get the key answer. Now, what we measure on a selected response assessment are the students' receptive skills. And when we mean receptive, it is something that they bring into them, which is listening, because they bring in words when they listen, they bring in ideas when they listen to dialogues. Reading, they bring in information when they read every part of the book, right? And so examples of the selected response assessments would actually be the ones that we have been doing, like giving them true or false. If this item is stating a fact, write true. If this item is not stating a fact, write false. Or when we say matching, okay, or multiple choices. So those are selected response items, okay? Now, let's try to move to the other. According to the same researchers, the second general category of alternative assessments or alternatives in assessment is actually what we call the constructed response assessment. So, unlike the selected response, which is more isolating because the students just need to choose from the options that are provided for each question, the constructed response is going deeper. Okay, we're trying to gauge their learning in a deeper way. Okay, because if it's constructed response assessment, we mean that the students will produce the language by either speaking, doing, or writing. Okay, what do I mean? When you Let's go back to the very basic example. When it's a purposive communication class, I would want them to use the English language to write the speech. Okay, that is a constructed response. Therefore, we're expecting an output from the students, but it's not just an output, it is an output that will demonstrate or that will inform us as teachers if they were able to understand something from our oral communication class. Okay, and I want them to speak. I want them to deliver orally the speech that they have written in my class. So, apart from writing the speech, they will also deliver the speech, and that's exactly what they will do. So, it will be a very solid evidence to me as a language teacher that they have learned something or they did not learn something at all in my discussion. And it will also tell me if I am ready to move to a higher level of topic or the succeeding topic, or should I reinforce other matters on the current topic? Okay, so that's very nice. That's a wise, that's so wise for a certain educator to think about. And for the constructed response, unlike the selected response, which only measure the receptive skills, we are more on production. We are more on productive skills, which means to say, if we had the students listen to our lecture, then they should manifest that learning through speaking or writing. Meaning to say, we're trying to tell them to come up with an output that will demonstrate their learning. So it's very important also when you use constructed response assessments in observing interactions of receptive and productive skills. Okay, examples of the tests that we give under constructed response assessment is actually fill in, short answer. When you say short answer, we give a question and then in few number of sentences they will give a certain answer. Performance, like you let them deliver the speech, you let them write an article, you let them answer an essay, you let them something that they can do, okay, to demonstrate their learning. Now we have the performance. The performance is the heart of a constructed response assessment. And when we mean performance, we're trying to measure this assessment that we're giving is our means as teachers to measure our students response to real life language tasks. Okay, we're learning the English language in the classroom, we're learning literature, we're learning grammar in an English classroom, and we want the students to actually apply that in real life. Okay, so if I'm teaching you the diction in of a public speaker, which means to say the proper choice of the words, then that has to transpire in your real life communication, and I have to observe that as an educator. Or if I'm teaching you how to properly organize your ideas on a written speech, that you observe cohesion and coherence, I have to see that ability in your written speech as a requirement. Okay, so it is more authentic. It is an alternative assessment. And at the same time, we estimate the students' true knowledge abilities rather than sticking with a paper and pen, which we know is very limiting for our students. So instead of asking them what are the features of a formal speech, why not let them write a formal speech and deliver it by themselves? Okay, so we can rate our students based on their rubric and criteria, and we would be informed as educators how far they've learned, how far they've grown, how far they've unlearned the concepts. And we also can predict from their performances the future performances that they will discharge in connection to real life language situations, so that even if they're outside the classroom, they can still apply those learning, because this is not memorized learning. This is something that they've done and they were prepared to do it, so they do it in real life, okay, and they do it confidently and naturally. So we wanted that for our students. We have the personal response assessment as the third general classification. Now, when you know it's personal response, it's something more metacognitive because we're trying to individualize learning. It is a more personal and a more individualized assessment because you will give a question which will divide the students in different responses. Like, for example, this question will actually come up with a more analytical point of perspective. So, are you pro or anti of this particular social issue in the society? You will expect not all students will share similar concept. Others would say yes, others would say no. Okay, so you will divide the students and you will test how the students would think in different routes. Okay, it's more individual to them. You're approaching them in a more personal way through the questions or through the assessment that you give. And some of the examples under personal response assessment that we can use in our language classroom is actually to um, give them conferences, like interview them. It's part of the activity aligned to your discussion, or they will create a portfolio where they can compile and curate all the activities and performances that you've given them in the quarter, or you let them assess their performance on a certain task, or let the others or their peers assess them for themselves. So performance self-assessment will, you need to read under the personal response assessment is first performance self-assessment. So in this way, the teacher or the language educator, because this is the trend, the language educator would let the students read the situation and decide how well they would respond to it. So, for example, in a literary piece, okay, would you think that you will do the same if you are the character in the story? Why or why not? Okay, you will let the students approach it in a more personal perspective. Others would say, I will do the same as the character in the story, but others would also say, I will not do the same as the characters in the story, and you let them justify. So they perform in the nature of a self-assessment. Okay, and we also have comprehension self-assessment. So this is more on a reading material. When you let them intently read a certain reading material that is connected to your lesson or connected to your topic, and then you try to let them give you the summary, synopsis, or react to the reading material. Because when they react, or when they summarize, or when they come up with a synopsis of the material that they've read, it's also your point as a teacher to observe how far and how deep they understood the concept of the reading material, because we're trying to elevate the students understanding here. We're trying to upgrade our students level of comprehension, and they themselves will assess it when you and they will know how far they've grown in comprehension, and at the same time observation. Why not come up with activities in the English classroom that is also more authentic, like letting them listen or record themselves or their speeches and listen to their own voices, listen, watch their own performance via recorded materials, and let them decide, because it's self-assessment. You let them decide how will they rate their performance, what can they say, what should have they done to better their performance, and what do they think are the strengths of their performance based on the video of their own that does the activity. Okay, so that's very good. Okay, well, I'm teaching students how to, I'm actually teaching the students how to do public speaking. So I normally let them record. Now that we are on the hybrid learning modality, I let my students record their performances or their tasks. And what I wanted to do is actually to observe how did they perform on their recorded speech, and they have to contemplate. They have to rate themselves accordingly. Okay, it's more of a self-assessment, or I may let other students or their peers rate their performance, um, rate their performance. Okay, so that is self and peer assessments. It's already coming directly from the student. How did they assess themselves in that certain assessment? Okay, did they grow, did they learn much, or is there something that bothers them that we need to reinforce as part of our discussion, as part of our teacher's job? Okay, so After that, my dear colleagues, we have the issues of language assessment. Now let's talk about washback effects. We actually, what we call as washback effect, we believe on the idea that all tests will have a certain impact on our teaching and learning. When we give assessment to our students, there will always be an impact, but this is something very cautious. The washback effect would come in two forms. Either the washback could be a positive washback, or either it could be a negative washback. Now, based on the body of literatures, when you say it's a washback effect, meaning to say the impact of our assessments in our teaching and to the students' learning, if it's a positive washback, which we should all desire as English teachers, if it's a positive washback, our activities will really intend to attain what the students should attain, meaning to say their competencies. We are giving them the assessment that is directly measuring their acquired competency. Okay, and we also mean positive washback when our activities or our assessments are directly aligned to our curricular mandates. Okay, because we follow a certain curriculum and we know that the curriculum is the backbone of our teaching. Okay, so our curriculum and our assessment should be aligned together. That is the alignment principle. And we make sure that positive washback is we were able to attain the competencies that the lesson aspires the students to attain. Okay. On the other hand, when you say it's a negative washback effect, we mean that our discussion is not aligned, our activities are not aligned to the curricular mandates, and our activities failed to actually develop the competence that we ought to develop from our students. So we choose to be creating a positive washback. Okay. Now, Bachman and Palmer back in 1996, which was also superseded by Bachman back in 2004, they pointed out that washback can be viewed as a subset of a test's impact. Now, we're not just talking about a micro scale here. We're talking about a macro scale, which means to say we should look at examinations, tests, and assessments inside the classroom that is affecting the entire society. What do I mean? Um, if it's in a washback effect, they believe it has two effects, kinds of effects, the micro and the macro. If that's micro, it will just be affecting the student's performance on the assessment, would just affect the teacher and the students. Okay, so it's a micro. It's within the classroom only, but it goes beyond that when it's a macro scale. So you see the performance of our students on the assessment would actually impact a larger sector than the classroom. That's what we call the macro effect. What if they did not excel in the assessment you've given, okay, and you let it be as a teacher, you did not do something else, you did not reinforce the learning to better their performance on the assessment, they will carry that for a lifetime. When they graduate high school, intermediate grade, and when they go to college, they will not be prepared for that. Okay, because we were not able to reinforce that. And then when they look for a job, because all jobs will look for a person or a worker that is proficient, fluent, and capable to speak the English language, or is the global Franca, for example, they will suffer from that. Okay, they would fail from that. They could be disqualified because of that. So you see, it's becoming macro. Now we're trying to prepare our students. We try to equip our students with the necessary competencies through our assessments. That's why I'm saying we are out from paper and pencil test. We are beyond memorization here. We're giving them real world tasks where they can demonstrate their learning so that when they move out of the classroom, move out of the education, land as a professional and scout for a job, okay, they can face the world. Okay, you get what I mean? Their skills that they learn from the classroom are applicable to their own world, okay, and to their future world, which means to work, to be a professional, to communicate with other people, and that's all. Okay, now Another issue that we want to address in doing language assessment, my dear teachers, is the language test in school admissions. Okay, what if the students wanted to enroll in a certain university, in local university? We need to prepare them because the local universities already have entrance exams. Okay, and normally, my dear language educators, English would always be a dominant portion of any exam. And what if our students would actually intend to enroll overseas? Or exactly now, in the age of internationalization and globalization, we want our students to go out and explore other universities, study outside, and learn from different cultures and learn from different teachers with different perspectives about these academic matters. They actually have to surpass, qualify themselves through what we call now as entrance examinations or school admissions. And we know that English language, in our context, language teachers, is very important to be enforced to our students. Their ability to speak the language, their ability to comprehend the items in entrance examinations written in the English language, their ability for that, their language ability should be prepared in the classroom through the assessments that we give. Okay, because many students across the globe still fail different university or higher education examinations because they're lacking the basic language skill, and we don't want that to happen. So what we wanted is to remediate on this possible lapse or gaps in the future by giving them more relevant and more authentic alternative assessments. Okay. Now, we also have the third issue. We are trying to question the validity of language tests. Okay. The validity would mean that, is this test trying to fulfill the objective of the course? Is this test trying to fulfill what it intends to fulfill? Because if that is the case, then there is no problem. But what if the language tests that we give them are really not valid? What if the language test is measuring another skill that we are not prioritizing to measure? Or what if this is ours, this is the skill we wanted to measure through this test, but what if our questions are really not supportive of our prioritized language skill for the students? So there will be a mismatch, there will be a chaos. Okay, they will not perform well in that language test because it's not valid in the very first place. So we want our language test to be valid. That also is the reason, my dear colleagues, why we have what we call as ability approach. There are tests that are modeled in an ability approach. What does that mean? It was made more popular by Bachman and Palmer back in 1996, which means to say that all the items, all the types of the test that we give under ability approach is and are items that only measure the student's organizational competence, pragmatic competence, and strategic competence. Now let's try to differentiate the three. When you say organizational competence, it's their ability to organize their ideas, okay, in a more meaningful way, in a more well sequenced way, whether that be oral or whether that be in written communication. But when you say pragmatic competence, we are trying to test how far they will use the language for practical applications. And when you say it's strategic competence, we teach the students to use the English language in discoursing or communicating spontaneously or effectively to other people, and the ability to remediate communication breakdowns or communication misunderstanding. But that's only one approach under validity. We are also encouraged to embed in our language test the real life approach, which I think is the heart of alternative assessment. This is where we are at now. Real life approach. What is the connection of what they learn in the classroom to the real life? Okay, how will they apply these classroom learning to the real life tasks? Okay, so we consider in the real life approach the extent to which the task performance replicates some specified non-text language performance. So we don't just stick with paper and pen already. We don't just limit our students to choose from the options that we've provided. We let them explain the task in their own way, do the task um, but showing and integrating the knowledge that they had, and that we measure them with success criteria. That's why Spolsky in 1985 denoted that real life approach is what it means to know how to use a language. So when we teach them the parts of speech, we give them simulated tasks where they can use the parts of speech in real life conversations. We let them go to the market, go to other schools, build a friendship to other students who are not their classmates, and try to use these parts of speeches in their discourses. That becomes more real life, okay? And that's what we wanted them to know, okay? Now, from Hawaii, from the University of Hawaii, back in 1996, there was an author in the name of Brown who actually combined both the ability approach and the real life approach. Okay, so he combined that in the test that he made, and you know what is surprising and what's interesting is it's very powerful. Okay, it's more effective than choosing ability alone and real life alone. Why not combine them in the assessments that we make? Meaning to say, some of the assessments that we give, if it's a dual approach, there will be like parts of the assessment that will measure the students' strategic competence, pragmatic competence, and organizational competence. And there will be parts in the assessment that will measure the students' ability to use the language in real life application. So we can combine ability approach and real life approach together in a certain assessment, and that's more inclusive for our students. That's more better, so that we can be informed as language educators how far they really perform and how far they really learn. Okay. Now the fifth issue is the reflection of social values in tests. Okay, now please take note, my dear teachers, that when we give a language exam, when we give a language activity, when we give a language test, it will serve for different purposes. It's not just for academic purpose, because if that's for academic purpose, we mean that the student teacher standpoint. But the result of the assessments that they also do in the classroom will have something to do with political purpose. What is political purpose? The alignment of what we do in the classroom to the national standards of our education. In the Philippines, we have the Department of Education for public schools, and in private schools, we have the Private Education Assistance Committee. Okay, so they have like frameworks that they follow, they have educational policies that they follow, they have been prescribing competencies for such a subject for teachers to follow. Okay, so it is also a political standpoint. Okay, and we make sure that our assessments will really be relevant to what is mandated by our a national framework or our national educational policy. And we also have social benefits of these tests. Why social? Because it's the way the students will work with the community, will work with the different sectors of the community. Okay, so they will apply the learning in the classroom to build camaraderie, relationship, build communication, build collaboration to different sectors of the community. And please understand that their performance in the classroom in terms of assessment is not just for the sake of compliance, but more than that is to also prepare them for what is in store for them in the future. Like, for example, when they land for a job, all the jobs now, even if you're not specializing in the English language, they would mean that you have to come up with the English, a good level of English use. Okay, you have to be proficient in the English language because this is already the lingua franca, or this is already the international communication. And so everyone in tourism industries, academic sectors, and others, when you go here or abroad, then you still have to know how to speak the language. So imagine if we failed in giving our students real life based assessments where they can use the language in equality, they will not fail such mandates in our society. But if we fail to do that as language educators, then there will really be disqualification of our learners when they scout for a job that necessitate competence in the English language. So as early as now in our assessments in the classroom, we have to be encouraged to really look at their future, be long term on our approach, make sure that our assessments are real life based. Okay, so there are things, there are reflections here, desirable skills, competencies, and qualifications. Again, the proficiency or a good level of English language is already a universal qualification when you scout for a job, regardless what industry that is. So we are playing a very big role to prepare our students in these future happenings. When they go to a job, they have to be qualified because they were able to also, apart from their skill, they were able to actually use the English language, which is a universal qualification for workforces. Okay. And second, realization from the reflection of societal values in our language test is the increasing number of bilingual schools. Okay. So our language test should also encompass linguistic identity of our students. So what word can they better understand in their context? What English word will be simpler for them to understand, because this is something that they're more used to hear in their context. Okay, just my example a while back. What word will you use best in a certain test question? Would it be a word like cab, or is it a word like taxi? Because between the two, cab is a British variety and then taxi is an American variety. I would rather prefer in the context of the Philippines than we use the word taxi in forming the test question, because this is more familiar in the context of our students. That is the rule of the thumb, and we also have the consideration to educational accountability. It will also inform us. So how are we going to prepare the students for this? How are we going to integrate societal values in the language tests? Okay. Now we also have the sixth issue that we need to address in doing and administering the examinations or tests or assessments in our language classes. What if, how prepared are we that language test would be digitalized, which means we need to integrate computers, technology, and media in testing our students language abilities. Okay, and it was Alderson back in 2001, okay, who advised that computers should be used in all stages in preparing the examination for the students, in developing the test, in administering the test, in all process. We need to inject or integrate the use of computers already, especially now that we are in the post-pandemic era, where our education is no longer purely on-site or physical or face-to-face. Okay, we're already shifting and dramatically shifting, getting used to virtual education, to distance education, where we need networks, computers, and technology to join our classes. We're actually having blended approach in learning, or having a hybrid or a high flex learning modality. Okay, so we already see that media is already connected to the language more than ever. Okay, so we need to be used with it. Okay, we wanted to inject media in developing tests for our students. We wanted to maximize media platforms in building students linguistic abilities or communication abilities using the English language. So that is the point. Okay, and according to Monique Howe back in 2001, it emerged in his study that the students really adhere to the fact that their level of confidence to learn the language, their level of confidence to apply the language in use, okay, or to practical context, is aided by what? Is aided by internet. Okay, so there are three pointers of sources of their confidence in language use: library, self-access center, and internet. Now it already implies that media should now be a trend in language teaching. We need to integrate our language teaching to media. Okay, and we are open to the fact that examinations could also go more digitalized these days. We are already open to the fact that we can exploit and maximize all necessary platform or educational platforms in the internet to support the learning of the students in our classroom. Okay, we can let them view a video, we can let them hear an audio podcast, we can have them read the texts in digital copies, and a lot more. We can even have them perform and do the process of the activities online in our virtual meetings or in our virtual rooms. And we also have Purapal back in 2003, who found the ability of the use of email. I think this is also something that is going fad now in English language teaching. Okay, not only in the Philippines nor in Asia, but across the globe. Why not use email? Or other platforms in media to significantly teach our concepts in the language, like what Prapal did in 2003. He was teaching English for academic purposes, and he used the media, like the email, to test the students' writing ability. Like the email, the students were tasked to actually compose an email using the English language, following the discussion on coherence and cohesion and proper choice of words and formality of the words to be used. Okay, and the students was able to succeed that part. They have been measured with their language ability through a digital platform, which is through an email. Okay, so seventh issue is the success and failure of policy implementation. Now, this is also something that is bothering me as a language educator, because we already have a shift from the traditional assessment, which is paper and pen, that we mean we are teacher centered and student to teacher centered back in the traditional assessment. It's no longer the trend now, because the educational fad would tell you that it's the other way around. The learning should be learner centered, so it will be the learner who will undergo the process themselves. It will be the learners who will perform the activity. It will always be the learner who will process their learning, and the teacher's role become more of a facilitative role. Okay, so we just facilitate the learning of the students, and we wanted our students to do that. So we make sure that our language assessments in the classroom are really student centered and are really offering our students a lifelong learning. Okay, so Brown and Hudson back in 1998 warned us to pay attention to the concepts of reliability, practicality, and validated assessment procedures. Okay, and speaking of practicality, again, we go back to real life approach. Okay, we bring their learning to real world applications. Okay, and we also have issues. These are actually problems that were enumerated by BM back in 1997, because according to him, unless we settle all of these problems, then we can already um, attain success in policy implementation in our language assessments. Okay, so for teachers, and I know but that some Filipino teachers here would probably agree. I also encourage you, my dear teachers, to also share your ideas on our comment box regarding these matters, because according to BM, in the context of Thailand education, which I think is almost similar to the educational orientation of the Philippines and other Asian countries, for teachers, they actually have these problems like having heavy teaching loads. So they are having like under time on intensively preparing themselves, because their attention is divided on piles of heavy teaching loads. Okay, different sections, different students, different timelines, different schedules. Okay, so there's also like a problem that we encounter on those part. Too many students in the class. Okay. Well, the advantage of having a minimum number of students in the class, it becomes more direct and more hands-on. You can actually have the students one after the other reside, unlike for a big size of a class that is really a little more advantages on most of the times. Insufficient language skill and native speaker cultural knowledge, that's also a problem by teachers. Inadequate equipped classrooms and educational technology. So how can we embed um, um, media in language teaching or language learning if we don't have the technological resources in the very first place? So we need to equip our classrooms with media. We need to expose our students to media and we hope that our government will also be supportive about this matter. We also hope that our educational systems would eye on this matter. Okay, especially now that Philippines, for example, is actually into a virtual education already, high flex learning modality, blended or hybrid learning modality becomes the trend, not only in the country, but even to the rest of the world. So media really plays a big role in language teaching and learning. Okay, and we also have to prepare our students for entrance examinations, such as offering them tutorials, or even go back to the very heart of it to come up with assessments that will really equip the students for this. Okay, and for the students' side, some of the problems enumerated by BA back in 1997 is their lack of opportunity to use the English language in their daily lives. That's the reason why I was saying that alternative assessment should connect the students' learning to the real world application. We have to be personal, practical, and authentic on our approach. When we teach the students about formal speeches, then we try to let them demonstrate what formal speeches are. Okay, right there and then we can gauge their learning. They could have the opportunity to immerse themselves in the English communication. They will build that English language communication skill, and there will be no problem. Okay, so that there will also be like problems on unchallenging English lessons. So we don't no longer stick with memorizing what a noun is, what a verb is, an adverb is. We need to let the students, for example, craft a speech that contains these parts of speeches, take pictures of landscapes or signages that makes use of these parts of speeches and try to identify them, which parts were used in a billboard, in a certain material. If that's going to be our approach in teaching the students, then I can guarantee, my dear teachers, that we are one step closer to student successes in language learning. And we don't want to have passive learners. That's why our era, in as far as the trend of language teaching is concerned, then we make sure that it's student centered. All the activities, even the discussion, will really be student centered. And we need to teach and reinforce the responsibility to our learners. We need to equip them to be autonomous learners. That's why we make sure that our lessons and our activities in the classroom, generally our assessments would really be centered to them. Okay? They will do the output, they will perform, they will make the product from their learning. Okay, now we have trends in language assessments. I think I will end from this discussion because we already have taken 20 minutes beyond time. Let me just steal 7 more minutes, madam, to finish these last points of discussion. So the trends in language assessments would be um, human resources. Human resources development and professional certification. That's what I'm saying. We look at our assessments to be long term for our students. When they go out of the classroom, they will be applying for a job, and the on all jobs will universally only qualify workers or professionals that attain or who possess a good level of English proficiency. And I think that assessments would really have a big help on this development. Okay, we also need the trend. This next trend is the integration of media in language teaching and learning. That's why we have the concepts of electronic portfolios, emails, and other softwares and platforms that we can use for students' successful language learning. We also have the concept of e-learning and e-testing, especially in these post-pandemic times. We also have the third trend, which is quality assurance and English assessment. Okay, so we want our students to take assessments that are making sense to them. We want these assessments to be real life based to them. We want them to approach our assessments in a personal, practical, authentic way. And so I suggest that apart from following the international standards, because in the Philippines, both private and public schools, I know that apart from the depth and competencies that are required, we are sure that our competencies were also invested to directly align to UNESCO's, okay, or other international standards. Much more that Philippines is driving towards internationalization, even in the academic sector. So we're trying to align the curricular mandates or curricular competencies of these courses from the international, and we try to cascade that to the local. So it has to be really aligned. Even in the development of our assessment, it has to really be aligned. Okay, don't just give activities that are not aligned. Okay, because if that is the case, then we defeat learning. Okay, we defeat learning or language learning of the students. Okay, so we align our curricular mandates, our learning objectives to international frameworks down to the local frameworks down to the classroom, and we optimize local and global knowledge of our students. And let me just tell you, my dear teachers, that we give them the picture of what really happens outside. When they learn English now, what would that impact them? Okay, or what is its impact to them when they go out of the classroom? They will meet Americans, they will meet Asians, they will meet people with different languages, and the only medium of instruction or communication they can use is English language to communicate. So that becomes already balancing local and global knowledge about our students. Okay, fourth trend is learner or not autonomy and the self-assessment. We want our students, our assessments in the classroom to be student centered. Okay, we want them to be more accountable on their learning. We want them to perform the task. We want them to undergo the process of accomplishing the task. We don't want to limit them on just optional items. Okay, we want them to do the process the learnings themselves, and we act as facilitators, as teachers. Okay, much more that examinations now do not necessarily need to be printed, because some examinations will be computer based or web based already. And we also have the consideration of the nature of assessment, like the high stakes or the low stakes assessment. Now when you say low stakes, my dear teachers, it would just be a reminder that this is something informal. Okay, and then high stakes will be something more formal, like examinations, quarter examinations are high stakes exams, okay, or high stake assessments. Okay, low stakes are informal observations by the teacher about a student or about a group of students, and so on. We also have the advanced technology, and then we it's important for as a trend in language assessment, in as far as authentic and alternative assessments are concerned, it's important that we give feedback, whether that be a formative assessment or whether that be a summative assessment. It is very important that teachers provide descriptive, analytic, and comprehensive feedbacks, so that the students would also know what else to be improved in their performance, what else to be improved on their outputs, what else could be improved on their process in doing the task. Okay, it will also play a great role of their language learning if our assessments would establish a clear and a definite criteria, rubrics, and checklists, because these ones are success indicators. With our rubric, criteria, and checklist, it would not just be an issue of the numerical value or numerical scores of the activities. More than that is the students will realize what else should improve on, what criterion should I still improve on, what criterion did I lack behind so I can still improve it. And it will also inform the teacher what else he needs or she needs to reinforce in the class, given the criteria that the students um, mostly did not achieve, or what in the criteria did they mostly achieve. Okay, so we also become more informed or well informed about how they progress in their education. Okay, and then the significance of multiple sources of information. We try to also, because we're trying to blend in our assessment local and global knowledge, we don't just stick with Philippine textbook. If your context is in the Philippine education, do not just stick with Philippine textbook. Combine the knowledge or concepts of a Philippine textbook to other cultures or other parts of the country, like get Western books also, and try to collaborate and curate these materials so that we could enrich our discussion with our students. Probably there will be like more effective assessments that they do in the other countries, which we can adopt or adapt in our context. Okay, but again, there's nothing wrong with doing this, only that we need to consider our context. Okay, and then lastly, again, my dear colleagues, there will be assessments that may work in US but may not work in the country, in the Philippines, or in the Asian region, and vice versa. So what does that mean? There will always be recognition of contextual and cultural aspects. Okay, again, as I was saying, we are trying to develop assessments here. We try to design, develop, and administer assessments here that are familiar to our students, familiar in terms of their context. This happens in their environment. Okay, this is not far away from them, or this happens in their culture. Okay, this is something that they observe in their situation. This is something that they confront every day. This is something that they experience every day. If we can come up with those assessments, then that is more meaningful to our students. And I think that is a more authentic way of really measuring how far our students learned. Okay. Now, I'm providing to you this. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. Again, I hope that you were able to learn something from our discussion for today. And I would just want to tell you that again, it is more meaningful when our assessments are connected to students' context and to their culture at the same time when it becomes more real life in its approach. But don't worry, my dear teachers, we are not standing alone in this battlefield because of all the issues that I've given and all of the challenging trends that we still need to embrace in this era, we are not left behind. Why? Because we are still collaborate not only with our learners but even to our educational affiliations, to the government, and of course. We collaborate to all stakeholders so we make it more participatory in terms of addressing these issues and adapting to the trends. So maraming salamat from the Philippines. Thank you very much. I hope you learned something this afternoon. Ma'am?
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful presentation. It's time for our quiz session. So, after completed our quiz session, we come back again in our question answer session. Okay, sir? Okay, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Pardon me, please. I was unable to hear that.
Sir, it's time for our quiz session. After
Mhm.
completed our quiz session, now we come back again in our question answer session.
Okay. Can we be
Okay.
done with our quiz, madam?
Uh, we start our quiz session now.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear participant, now we'll go our quiz session. Uh, After short video, we'll start our quiz session. To to join this session, you have to go slido.com. After that, you have entered the code. The code is IGP2. Uh, After short video, we'll start our quiz session. So let's enjoy the our quiz session. Uh, Dear participant, time for quiz session. To join this session, you have to go slido.com. After that, you have to enter the code. The code is IGP2. We'll pick your name from Slido. So join with your full name, which will directly print on certificates. Top 15 will be awarded with quiz comprehension certificates. Already 37 people join in our session. So we encourage everyone to join this session. To join this session, you have to go slido.com. After that, you have to enter the code. The code is IGP2. Dear participant, we are still for your joining. So please, everyone join early in our session. After 2 minutes later, we start our quiz session. So please, everyone join early. Now start our quiz competition. First question. People in this profession conduct security assessments for organization and design security system and process. First option, security management specialist. Second option, dog the bounty hunter. And the correct answer is uh, first option, security management specialist, and 95% peoples are right. And our leaderboard first ranker is Jannatul Firdos. Our second question. In the GDP, which of the following is subtracted? First option, gross private investments. Second option, imports. And the correct answer is option 2, imports. And 30% people are right. And our top ranker is Amelie F. Frangi. What percent of teachers in the workforce are female? Option 1, 85. Second option, 65. 74% people tell the option 1 and 26% people tell the option 2. The correct answer is 85, option 1. And the top ranker is the Fakunala. Question number 4. The first step in handling customer complaints is to first option, call the manager for assistance. Second option, let the customer explain the problem. And the correct answer is option 2, let the customer explain the problem. And 93% peoples are right. And again, our top ranker is Mia Fakunula. Five down question. An effective way to prioritize work is to categorize tasks in first option order of their importance, second option alphabetical order. And 98% people tell the option 1 and 2% people that option 2. And the correct answer is option 1. Six now question. A tool to share explicit knowledge simultaneously with co-workers in different areas. First option, hyperlinks. Second option, webcam. And the correct answer is option 2, webcam. And 38% people are right. And our top ranker is now Jannatul Firdaus. Seven now question. Risks caused by changes in the market and affect the production and distribution of products. First option, marketing. Second option, environmental. And the correct answer is environmental, and 43% people are right. And now our top ranker is Amelie Frangic. Eight now question. How many decisions can you be expected to make per day in the classroom? First option 400 to 800. Second option 800 to 1500. And the correct answer is option 1 for 400 to 800. Sorry, correct answer is 800 to 1500. And our top ranker is Jannatul Firdaus. Ninth question. Which of the following state does not allow for corporal punishment in schools? First option Oklahoma, second option New York. And the correct answer is option 2 New York, and 29% people are right. And our top ranker is Emily F. Franzi. Our last question. Investigative people are usually are interested in activities requiring motor coordination and skill. And first option true, second option false. And the correct answer is false. Only 26% tell the option 2. Congratulations, Emily Efranji. He is the top ranker. In second position, there is Joel Barnasser. In third position, Joel Barnasser. Fourth position is Jannatul Firdaus. Fifth position, Mariah Janibi Piliano. Uh, Congratulations, our top 10 quiz competition winner. Today's quiz competition winner. Uh, We have all of your name which you entered during joining. We will pick and prepare certificates and we'll post them on our Facebook official page. Our Facebook official page is Institution of Global Professional. Um, Now it's time for our quiz question answer session. So participants are requested to ask their question in our comment box. Please address speaker your name after question answer. We will share certificate process. So now after short video, we will start our question answer session. So let's enjoy our question answer session. Hello everyone, welcome back in our question answer session. Let's welcome our speaker. Hello sir.
Hi, ma'am. Hi, I'm back to the room.
Okay sir. Sir, welcome back in our question answer session.
Okay. Thank you
Uh,
very
part-
much.
Dear participant, if you have any question you can ask in our comment box. We are waiting for your question. Sir, our first question. Good afternoon sir. How does autonomy affect learning?
Okay. Thank you very much for that good question, sir. I think I'm seeing the name, Sir Flomi. Yeah, Sir Flomi. The question of Sir Lomi is, how does autonomy affect learning? Yeah, one of the phases of our alternative assessment in this century of teaching is actually having it student centered, and at the same time it will push the students to be autonomous on learning. I also want to posit the idea that it's not because it's not autonomy, it's the total absence of teachers' presence. We still have a presence, but it's unlike on the traditional assessments where we are completely the actors in the classroom. We facilitate the students. We have a very limited presence. But as to the autonomy that Sir Flomi is asking me, there are bodies of literature or bodies of studies, sir, that will actually prove that autonomy will affect learning. How? Because it will be the moment in time where the students will have to apply their own analytic and critical thinking abilities in coming up with some researches or doing the readings themselves. This is where we also motivate the students to um, activate, okay, their learning lifestyle. In fact, I actually read a study by Retchie and then Ryan back in 2017. Probably, sir, we can also read that. This was actually a study that was contextualized into ESL or EFL classroom. So I repeat, the researchers are Ryan and Desi back in 2017. And based on the research, sir, they actually deduced that autonomy in learning would affect the students in numerously positive ways, like there will be an improved motivation, there will be interest in the classroom, the students will also upgrade their learning motivation, and they will be having a good projection of academic success. That's it, sir.
Okay, thank you sir. Sir, our second question from Aaron Gate. Good afternoon, sir. What is the importance of alternatives in assessment?
Okay, I think my simple answer for the question of Sir Aaron here about the essence or importance of alternative assessments or alternatives in assessment, which we have discussed in my lecture, is the fact that we go back to the heart of alternative assessment. We wanted our students to go beyond rote or memorization type of learning, but we want them to activate their classroom knowledge or whatever they've attained from the classroom to be applied in practical applications or real life based applications. So that is the very essence of alternative assessment. So it will not just be isolated in a classroom, nor will it be just on the level of memorization, which is actually a surface level of learning only. So we go beyond and we include real life or real world applications to the students' learning. Thank you.
Sir. Thank you, sir. Dear participant, we are waiting for your question. If you have any question, you can ask in our comment box. Sir, there is no more question.
Thank you very
Uh,
much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Your wonderful presentation and give your precious time for us. Sir, any last word for our participant? Any last word?
Yes. Thank you very much. Of course, I would want to give my gesture of appreciation and gratitude to Institute of Global Professionals for having me in for the third time in the row. I think this is my third time to speak, and I will be having another speaking engagement or lecture with the IGP this December. And then I hope for more speaking engagements next year. Okay, thank you very much, IGP. And I also want to thank our participants here. I think dominantly on the pool of our participants are my kababayans, Filipinos. And thank you very much for your active participation. I really see the kind words and the kind feedbacks that you have for me on the comment box. And I wish to have you to have inspired you through this lecture. And I hope to meet you also soon, not only virtually. Maraming salamat. Thank you very much.
Okay. Sir, thank you. I hope everyone can learn from you. Uh, and thank you for sharing your valuable knowledge with us. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dear participant, now we will give you a webinar code. Uh, we have to wait for some times. Today program name is Trends and Issues in Language Assessment and the code is IGP1234. Uh, the code is IGP1234. Dear participant, our webinar code is IGP1234. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope everyone can learn from our webinar. Stay happy and blessed. So let's together and learn together. Thank you so much.